Hello guys and welcome to another episode of 0 Units Lost Challenge. Today we'll be taking on the Barbarossa campaign, as this is one of the AoK campaigns, that means Age of Kings. 3 rules: I can't lose any units, I can lose buildings or have them be converted, and 3, I can save regularly and use load games. Now with the rules out of the way, let's move on to the first scenario. This scenario is one of the most iconic scenarios in all of Age of Empires since its launch. It was even made into a competitive challenge by the devs in DE. We start off on an island in the middle of a map, which is filled with enemies surrounding us on all sides. Luckily, this middle of the map is an island which we are successfully able to wall off from enemy attacks on few choke points. With a not so gracious population limit of 125, we boom slightly and then we go up to Imp. I know guys, unbelievable. Imp in the first scenario of a campaign, I was aghast as well. However, that's great for us, as we can go for units none of our enemies have access to. Those being hand cannons, which pack a punch from distance compared to any other units the enemies can throw at us, and bombard cannons, which are of course better than traps if amassed, and can also snipe enemy siege, attacking our hand cannoneers. We completely wiped the floor with our first enemy, that being Lorraine, which didn't even make it to the castle age, so feudal against him, that's no match. We move on northward, supported by bombard towers, as we approach another one of our enemies, that being Saxony. They throw some of their army at us, mostly mangonels, monks and a few scattered units. However, against our 9 bombard cannons and around 30 hand cannons, they stand no match. We move into their base, snipe their TCs, snipe their production buildings, and even kill their castle in a short sequence of events. Now, they did not have any relics, which was quite disappointing to me, as we need to collect 4 relics to win this scenario. Slightly disheartened, we moved southward through their southern gate and approached another one of our enemies slowly. Sadly, even though our army is very effective, it's very slow as well. We lack the mobility needed to strike at many locations in short sequence. So we have to fortify our position everywhere with bombard towers, as not to lose ground quickly when an enemy mounts an assault against us. However, as you can mostly see during this scenario, they didn't really attack us in that amount as for me to have to fall back onto these bombard towers. They just had this support function to dish out the additional damage needed to complete the scenario quicker, and also secure a few resources for our villagers, which were by this time running out from the ones on the main island. Bohemians, to my great pleasure, had not just 1 but 2 relics at their disposal, which we seized appropriately after destroying their whole base. They tried to rebuild on few places, however the bombard towers served their function well and stopped the villagers from running around and rebuilding their base. Bohemians reside in due fashion, and we moved on to our last enemy, that being the Austrians. Austrians were described as the weakest enemy in this campaign, and they really were just that. They only threw longswords and rams against us, and we had really no problem dealing with them, as we basically hard-countered their whole composition with ours. Their castle went down, and with the flag on their monastery, I knew that the victory was close indeed. As the relic popped out, we moved forward to seize it, and after the monks graciously wobbled first to the relic and next to the monastery with the relic for what seemed like an eternity, this scenario was finished. And was finished at that with, drumroll, 0 units lost. This is a great feat on our part. And as we look back onto the map, we see that we actually took one of the easier ways to go about doing this, as the northern route really was filled with enemies that were mostly weaker or not as fortified. So we see green has a lot of fortified walls and burgundy has many towers. We move on to the second scenario, that being Henry the Lion, which will become a reoccurring figure during this campaign. We start off with a starting army and a camp, but without any villagers and with a meager pop limit of 100 units. We are tasked with defeating only Poland, which is spread across the map in multiple locations. First, I'm thinking of making just a melee composition comprised of purely knights, as I wanted to try that in one of the Teuton scenarios. However, as I move across a river to Polish territory, Henry the Lion betrays us. As I hadn't played this scenario since DE came out, I didn't really remember it happening, so I wasn't prepared to deal with it. He takes down all our houses, and we, stuck with such a low pop limit, have really no way to retaliate the attack or amass an army that would be able to take down Henry the Lion's quite well fortified base. He also makes Teutonic Knights, which are just incredible at countering every unit I have at my disposal at this point in the scenario. Thus I decide to restart and try another strategy. This time I decided to go for mangonels at the beginning of the scenario and use a little bit of a cheeky strategy with attack grounding down all of Henry the Lion's buildings, as I realized it would be near impossible for me to defeat him the intended way. So I get to work and I slowly and surely destroy all Henry the Lion's buildings one by one. In the meantime, I also make sure that none of my units really approach any of Poland's bases, as I suspect the trigger has something to do with moving across the map and attacking Poland itself. Now, Poland doesn't just wait around until I kill my own ally. They launch an assault as well, that being on my northern ally, intercepting my trade routes with their market. Thus, I am forced to respond to this attack and move in with my crossbows and knights. I decided to go for crossbows for a change, even though Teutons have a horrible crossbows, but they worked just fine as the enemy was in Challlenge as well, and Teuton crossbows get much worse only in Imp. I sniped the mangonels with my few knights that I had started with, and the crossbows took care of the rest as I lured the enemies around them. Castle of Henry the Lion meanwhile goes down, and so do the rest of his buildings. Thus, I finally feel secure and safe enough to move forward and attack Poland itself. I've prepared a few ramps in advance and garrisoned them with some of the starting units that would be otherwise useless, and we take down one of their castles very quickly. In due time, however, as we all know, Henry the Lion decides to betray us. This time, however, he has no base to fall back upon. He has just a few units scattered across his map that he already made before we destroyed his base. In the process of wiping out the last few units of Henry the Lion, we captured a bunch of villagers that were hiding in a pen in his base. We used these to finally construct a town and a monastery as well, and as to heal my units, and surprisingly to go to Imperial Age, which is actually available even in this 100 population scenario. When we arrive to Imp, we decide to switch up our composition back to the good and old-fashioned hand cannons and bombard cannons, as this worked the best in the previous scenario. We start taking down the Polish bases in quick succession with our Imperial Age army. However, they did not make any units to defend themselves, and I had a growing suspicion that this was a bug and not an intended feature, as most of their buildings were definitely meant for making units, as they did not have much of a beautiful base, rather a base full of production buildings. We won this scenario without major hiccups on this try, and as you can see, even though we had less than 100 kills, we still had the 0 deaths. And this was a much quicker scenario than first thought. We move on to the third scenario in this campaign, which is probably the shortest scenario if you play your cards right, and is mostly an A to B scenario where you have to convert the wonder in Milan in the deep south of the map, and you start in the northeast of the map with a few units and a few monks. There are two ways to go about playing this scenario. First, you convert some villagers, set up your base and steamroll, but that takes a long time. Second way to play this scenario is to go the speedrunning route and beeline the Milan Wonder with our few starting units, monks and cavalry. I leave the pikemen at base as they are just too squishy to take in for me on this challenge. I research the technologies I need, that being Redemption to be able to convert the building and Sanctity to get a few more HP on our monks. I move with my starting units down a river that I scouted ahead and sneak my way past the enemy base. However, few enemy ships come down at us and we have to micro our heart out against these. We only have one more ship than them, so it takes a bit of micro and a bit of luck on our side to really play this one out perfectly. Meanwhile, our small group of units is already moving south as we're not losing any time with this scenario. We quickly approach the southern gap in Milan's walls and we sneakily move through it to start attempting to convert the Wonder. The first try doesn't go as planned, as we didn't really have the lay of the land completely, didn't know where the monks are and got converted. The second one goes better, however my scout still dies after sniping the two monks. The knights are always there to kill the mangonel and the scout is there to kill the monks. The third try fails as well, however now I have the strategy in mind and with a bit of luck I'm able to kill both the monks and the mangonel and run around with my units, distracting the enemy as my monks convert the Wonder. This takes a bit of time, however, in the end we got it, and after a bit more running, the scenario is won. And of course, as this was quite a quick one, we finished it with 0 deaths, as you saw most of it, and with 5 kills. We move on to the fourth scenario and what turned out to be the big baddie of this campaign. I was already quite fearsome going in as I had problems dealing with this scenario even on normal settings. However, without losing units, that's almost impossible. The first try goes horribly as we die in the first 5 seconds as 2 of our villagers get insta-mangonelled by enemy unit. It's quite the fate, if I ever say so. After a bit of pondering, we decide to head for the southern base as it has a better defensibility of our naval units, which we won't be able to use anyway as Venice has too big of a navy and we would need to invest too much of our very small pop limit into water units. We plan on building a castle on the entrance to the river as to defend all our ships. We don't ungarrison the units that we got, as they aren't really ours yet, they are just Gaia units waiting in transport ships that would convert to us if we would pop them out. But I don't want to use these units as they would die very quickly in battle as they're mostly melee, and I want to go for my well-proven army of hand cannons and bombard cannons, as this is a very challenging scenario and I need to use every advantage I have at my disposal. We boom very quickly, get to imp as fast as we can and start amassing bombard cannons while also walling the choke points off as much as we can, as I know the huge waves of enemies are coming. We prepare as much as we can, we take into bombard towers, but when I check my KD, suddenly I have 1 death, and I'm wondering, wait, all my units are in my base, how could have I lost any? It must have been on the starter base where I escaped from. And I look at it, I look at the replay, and I'm checking if I have any deaths, and suddenly I realize that before this farm goes down, I had no deaths. After it goes down, I have 1. Guys, love you AoE2 devs, but I mean, these are some crazy bugs we encounter in each of our challenge playthroughs. I continue forward without really restarting, as I can't really do much about the farm dying, as I can move the farm away, you know, and it's not really a unit, so it doesn't fall under the auspices of this challenge. As we approach the pop limit of 125, we hold off the first major attack at our very fortified base, and after it we begin to march forward and slowly encroach on the map with some very toxic tactics of building small wall enclosures and sprinkling our castles in as we advance. We of course researched crenellations, which turned out to be majorly helpful in this scenario, as Venice, the naval enemy, do produce anti-building units, ships that is. However, they are the Romans, and Romans have less range than cannon galleons, thank god. And as it turns out, the crenellations castles outrange the Romans, just barely. So we don't really have to worry about Romans taking down all our castles, as the castles can shoot them down without major problems. We slowly continue our march forward and hide behind our walls as much as we can. However, sometimes we need to pop out of these to attack a few long-range siege units that are taking down our castles, as right here. However, we successfully move forward and forward closer to the base of Henry the Lion, as that will be our first enemy to take down. As I'm not really appreciative of his backstabbing nature and want to carry out the revenge as fast as I can. But as I predicted, it's not all smooth sailing from here onwards. We even get attacked and lose a castle to too many of enemy units, as even 2 castles were unable to shoot them all down in time. In any case, it's not as bothersome as many of you may think, as the enemies lost all their armies against one of our castles and they're running out of gold at this point in the scenario, so we basically get the upper hand from this point onwards. They begin to be more scattered and send their units one by one onto our castles. We are finally able to get in range of Henry the Lion's base, and we take full advantage of it. I even make a singular trebuchet to trap down his castle from the comfort of my own home. We fortify our position with a castle in the middle of his base, as I know he would try to rebuild it if we hadn't built it there. We encroach forward with our well-proven wall tactic and attack Verona, which is the city where I will be building my wonder to win this scenario. We quickly clear out all of Verona, as by now they have almost no units and no resources, and just from a long while, and as we're waiting for the resources to amass for a wonder, we clear out Padua, as they're a bit of a nuisance, and at this point we really have nothing better to do. We kill Padua completely. Verona is somehow still in the game, they're hiding somewhere rebuilding, and we finally start building the wonder smack dab in the middle of Verona's former city walls. We finish the wonder quite quickly as we pulled most of our villagers onto it, and with that we win this excruciatingly painful scenario. The final tally tells us that we had 1718 kills, which is a major number, and the 1 farm death. Man, that farm screamed. Finally being done with that slog, we move on to a more quicker, fast-paced scenario, which I'm quite looking forward to, as I'm also better versed in this region's history and find it more engaging to play in. We begin with quite the formidable army, not that far from Constantinople. I decide to first move southwards up until Gallipoli. I handily evade the Saracen ambush by scouting ahead with my trebuchets and use my paladins to clean up the few ambushers. Heading further south, I stumble upon a Saracen castle. I lure out the units in small groups and dispatch of them with my halberdiers, as they're focusing on the paladins, so my halberdiers have the time to do so. I trebuchet the castle down and move further southward up unto Gallipoli. Gallipoli, however, doesn't seem to be the correct way for me, as I didn't remember much how this scenario is supposed to be played. They give us just a few transport ships, but warn us that the water is full of enemies, and I'm not risking that, because they would surely kill our transports in one way or another. So I decided to head for Constantinople. Upon reaching their gates, they turn upon us, and we have to fight quite a sizable army. However, as we're equipped with quite a few paladins and Teutonic Knights, it doesn't prove that much of a challenge, if we focus the onagers down before they can hit our Teutonic Knights. Teutonic Knights can take care of the rest, as those are mostly melee units. Now, those of you familiar with history, to a certain extent might question why Constantinople is attacking us, a Crusader army, Christian army, as Constantinople was also Christian back then. Let me explain. The army of Barbarossa wasn't the first Crusader army that went through Constantinople, and the first one even got invited in. However, seeing how the army didn't behave well and ravaged the city, they refused to give access to any further armies into the city. And judging by how we destroyed the city in this scenario, it's fair to say that they knew what they were doing. The fact is, Barbarossa did not just have strained relations with Byzantium, that being Constantinople, he even had an alliance with a Turkish sultan ruling most of Anatolia, that being modern Turkey. In any matter, this sultan was very weak at this point, which Barbarossa did not know, and the sultan couldn't keep his own army from attacking Barbarossa. So Barbarossa broke the alliance and basically fought both against Constantinople and Byzantines and the sultans of Anatolia, sultans of Rum. Now, as you could see in the background during me spitting facts, we were able to seize the ocean from the Saracen navy and were able to unload our ships on the Asian side of Anatolia, where Seljuks rule. We were able to capture a few cav archers from under a tower and continued forward with a cheeky strategy of evading almost every Saracen fortress on this side of the map. We cut as many trees as we had to, killed a few castles, and slowly moved forward. There weren't any further huge battles that awaited us in this scenario, as we hugged the edge of the map to evade as many battles as we could. Further help was provided by this conveniently placed forest, which even the narrator puts into our attention, and it proved to be a major shortcut. We moved all our units through there, and to my surprise and relief, there weren't any further Saracen units that we had to fight, only a few wolves that we obliterated with our siege onagers. They stood no chance, they did not even aggro. Making it to our final destination, one of the guards standing at the gate noted that we look very bad, in a bad condition, as that was the expected outcome of this scenario. However, to my great amusement, we had all our units and all of them were full HP, or at least most of them. We finished this scenario with, of course, 0 units lost and crazy 94 units killed, which is actually more than the Henry the Lion scenario. As you can see, we evaded a lot of castles and a lot of unnecessary fights, which would have made this scenario exponentially more painful. And thus we approach the last scenario in this campaign, where our hero Barbarossa did not stand a chance while bathing in the river and drowned. We have to deliver his body in a car to the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, which is in the deep south of the map, and we of course start on the other end of it. We are blessed with a gracious 10-minute treaty to build up before enemies attack us. Damascus and Saladin are dividing us and Jerusalem, and there is really no way to get past them without dealing with at least one of them. I will be heading for Damascus as they are in the middle of the map and the most direct way in. What we decide to do before they turn on us, we wall all their gates, and as AI is very dumb, they can delete their walls if they have all their gates walled, and so they are just stuck behind them. Both Saladin and Damascus together have only 3 gates, centered around one choke point. So our strategy fits perfectly. After they turn on us, we build a few castles in a convenient location from where they can shoot down enemy units. Meanwhile, we continue to boom and tech into further units and buildings such as Bombard Tower and hand cannons. Green didn't prove to be much of a challenge, as most of his units are much more squishy, and he makes mostly mugs, mamluks and camels, which he gets stuck on the ledge as close as he can get to our castle. After clearing the whole army of Damascus, which I wouldn't have been able to do without this cheeky strategy of staying behind walls, as they have battle elephants, which I have no counter to, we move into the base of Damascus after their units are depleted and completely roll them and support our advance with further bombard towers. As this is the last showdown of this campaign, it's an expansive scenario and we really are put to test with our abilities. We micro down a few siege onagers, which I got quite good at during this campaign, and my bombard cannon micro has definitely improved a ton during this challenge. We move further downwards and southwards as we approach the walls of Jerusalem itself and the final stretch of this scenario. Jerusalem is more of a pushover enemy, as they produce mostly pikemen, skirms and a few siege onagers. We fortify our positions at their walls with another castle, already smelling the sweet taste of victory. Their whole army smashes against this castle in particular and are quite formidable army at this point, fully teched out with 30 hand cannons, 4 monks and like 10 bombard cannons clears the way for the final part of this whole campaign, where we take our cart with the Emperor and move it southwards to the Dome of the Rock. Here I would like to remind you, if you enjoyed this video and this sort of content, please leave a like and subscribe for more content like this, or even leave a suggestion for what next campaign I should dabble into. We deliver this card to the Dome of the Rock and languish in our victory over this challenging campaign. The sweet sound of victory greets us, and we soon learn that we destroyed 600 units in this scenario, many of them war elephants, the tankiest unit in the game, and of course lost none. Sadly, here we part ways for now. Hope you enjoyed the video, have a nice day and see you next time. Bye!